Let's talk about what we did learn with national security expert and CEO of Global Risk and Intelligence Planning, Hal Kempfer, with the latest. Hal, thanks for joining us yet again. I thought that Milley and Austin were quite forthcoming about what they know, what they don't know, about what exactly happened. I want to get you to respond. I want to put up this tweet here. Liz Frieden, Jennifer Griffin's producer for Fox at the Pentagon, she says Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev told Russian state TV Russia would try to retrieve the MQ-9 drone. He says, I don't know whether we will retrieve it or not, but that has to be done, and we'll certainly work on it. I hope, of course, successfully. Now, you just heard Milley there, Hal, say essentially that there's probably not much to recover, and it's in quite deep of waters. What do you make of that?
Andrew, I think the key phrase was mitigative measures. It may not sound like an exciting phrase, but a couple things. Apparently, it's been reported widely, and it sounds like the sourcing is pretty official, that they can wipe the hard drives. So whatever intelligence data was on there, they can wipe the hard drives and do some things electronically with the sensor systems. Now, the other thing is with these types of aircraft, it's not uncommon that they would also have, as was talked about with the Chinese spy balloon, that they would have explosives on board. It wouldn't blow up the entire aircraft, but it would be placed around the most sensitive equipment, those sensor systems and things tied to those sensor systems. So if it is for some reason taken down, they can basically destroy or largely destroy that to make any useful recovery pretty much null and void. And it sounds like that's what he was hinting at, that they may have had some capability like that. So as it was probably getting closer to the ocean or closer to the Black Sea, they may have actually triggered it. The other thing is it's got this huge wingspan. Obviously, that's why it can stay up so long, is because of the tremendous lift capability, which means that even with the propeller going out, they could glide well out into the Black Sea. And as you heard, they put it in about 4,000 to 5,000 feet of water, which makes, with thermoclines and all the other issues, and especially if you had broken it up into small pieces, also a plane hitting the water like that, it makes finding it extremely difficult, and then finding anything useful virtually impossible in terms of intelligence value. So that's what he was kind of hinting at.
Okay.
Now, even though we don't have naval forces in there, we have NATO allies in there. There's
Sure.
commercial ships that we could charter and send in a underwater salvage team. So there's ways that we could go in there to do that.
Okay. Hal, you and I talked and have for the duration of the war in Ukraine now, and we're always kind of looking for these inflection points or flash points, especially when U.S. officials have to speak to their Russian counterparts. This was one of those moments. Austin and Milley got on the phone with their Russian counterparts in Moscow to talk about this. So the lines of communication, those channels still open. Who did they speak with?
Well, General Milley talked to General Gerasimov, who is his equivalent, his counterpart over there. And of course, Secretary Austin talks to Defense Minister Shoigu, who is his direct counterpart over there. And the Shoigu conversation that apparently has happened. The Gerasimov, it's not quite clear if that's happened yet. It sounds to me like it was scheduled, but they hadn't actually confirmed that it had taken place yet. And my guess would be a very direct conversation. It's not going to be couched in overly diplomatic terms, at least not at this point. One of the key contentions, and one of the things they have to make very clear, is that the Reaper was not in Russian airspace. It was in international airspace. And this goes to some of the overarching claims of waters, territorial waters, EEZs, everything else that Russia has made in the Black Sea. They'd like to think the Black Sea is a Russian lake.
Huh.
So this is one of the clarification things is, look, this is in international waters.
And that was brought up so many times today at this press conference by Austin and Milley both, that they kept repeating international airspace, international waters. This is where it took place.
Yeah, and we're going to be very clear about that. And by the way, they also have said we're going to keep flying. So even if the Russians put some out there, it's very likely that we could have another MQ-9 Reaper flying over whatever little fleet or salvage operations going on. The other thing is that the Russians should be thinking about is the Ukrainian capability to target their ships. They've proven it time and again that they can do that with unmanned surface vessels and with drones, normal, unmanned aerial vehicles. And so, if the Russians put ships in a known location, at a fixed location in the Black Sea, they're taking on a risk that that they could be targeted, and that's something that the Russians have to think about. And that would be rather embarrassing for the Russians to put Russian naval ships in a salvage operation trying to get a U.S. drone, and then manage to get one of their ships sunk by the Ukrainians with a unmanned surface vessel or something like that.
All right, Hal, just lastly, you heard that question there from that reporter. Is this considered an act of war? Is that too strong of language? Is that very, very harsh? Is that how we're treating this?
Right now, I don't see anybody talking about being an act of war. And the reality is, and I think General Milley made it clear, as foolhardy, as haphazard, as dangerous and risky as what the Russians are doing. Yes, it was intentional that they flew those Su-27s in and around the Reaper. Yes, they dropped fuel to not only cause problems with the sensor system, but they were probably hoping that might somehow knock out the propeller, knock out the propulsion on it. And they may have been trying to do a maneuver. This is possible. There's been some speculation that they were trying to do a maneuver very close to the Reaper where what would catch jet wash and possibly make it unstable and force it to crash. The thing is, Russian pilots are notoriously foolhardy, but not notoriously skillful in how they do these things. So it could have very well been that particular thing that hit the propeller could have been accidental, not intentional. Okay. Everything else was intentional, but that particular part of hitting the propeller could have been an accident, and that's basically because you have a rather unskillful Russian pilot doing something really stupid.
Sure.
So,
well,
yeah.
We'll leave it at that. Hal Kempfer, thanks so much. We'll definitely be speaking again if this story develops even further.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew.